This message comes from Whole Foods Market. Shake up dinner time at Whole Foods Market with bold flavors. Now through the 25th, shop the Fire Up Asia sales event in store and online. Kick dinner time up a notch at Whole Foods Market.
Okay, I'm asking ChatGPT, can you help me get less lonely? Enter.
I'm really sorry you're feeling lonely. I can definitely help with that.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. I'm so lonely. Do you relate? Well, you may be lonely, but you're not alone. 1/3 of Americans report feeling lonely at least once a week. And 16% of Americans report feeling lonely all or most of the time. Welcome back to our 3-part series, All the Lonely People. We're diving deep into how loneliness shows up in our lives and how our culture shapes it. So we've heard a lot of theories about why we're lonely, but one of the things that kept popping up was technology, how our reliance on our phones and the internet could be pushing us apart. New York Times reporter Brian Chen looked into the studies on this, and he found a consensus of researchers agree. There's a very strong correlation between tech use and loneliness. So tech might be part of the problem, but could it also be the solution? Based on my interactions with AI, maybe not for me personally, but there's a crop of new startups looking for all kinds of ways tech could combat loneliness.
Peoplehood is a 60-minute experience that is based around active listening and connected conversation.
Timeleft is, let's say, a friend-making service. They match you with 5 strangers, and then they send you to a surprise restaurant.
Meeno is a relationship advice app. It's powered by AI.
But are more apps really the answer? To find out, I'm joined by Sam Pressler, who studies community and social connection at the University of Virginia's Karsh Institute of Democracy.
Excited to be here.
And Vauhini Vara, veteran tech reporter and author of the upcoming book, Searches, Selfhood in the Digital Age.
Thanks for having us.
To start, I don't think anyone can say for sure that tech creates loneliness, but we do know that they're linked. What are the ways that tech and loneliness kind of go hand in hand?
Where I begin is really that the business model of these media platforms is capturing as much of our leisure time as possible. And if the business model is capturing as much of our leisure time as possible, then who or what is competing for that leisure time? It's community groups, it's our neighbors, it's our friends, it's our family.
So the tech companies that claim that they're bringing us closer together, their algorithms tend to favor what they call more engagement, right? It's like more likes, more shares, more followers. And that isn't necessarily conducive to, for example, like connecting me with my neighbor who I really enjoy talking to in the yard, but who has, 25 followers on social media and gets 2 likes on her post, right? Like if a social media algorithm is deciding between showing me her post about her garden, which I probably would be genuinely interested in,
Right,
or the post of some influencer in LA who has millions of followers and gets thousands of likes and shares of her posts, it's going to choose that influencer over my friend. So all of a sudden, these social media platforms that are supposedly about human connection end up prioritizing kind of the opposite of that.
At the same time that we're having this discussion about loneliness in tech and all the ways in which one can sometimes help the other to grow, we're seeing some new startups pop up that are trying to use tech to address, this same issue of loneliness. There's this app called Meeno. I'm so interested in this. It's a mentor-like relationship advice app for humans powered by AI, okay? There's the SoulCycle founder's new venture called Peoplehood, which does guided group conversations. There's Timeleft, which matches strangers for dinner. And of course, Bumble for Friends, which is a separate app from their dating app. What do you make of all these tech solutions to what may be at least partially a tech problem?
Yeah, in many ways, what's happening is they're taking this thing that we all innately know how to do as human beings, which is connect and commune. Like they're putting a paywall up in front of it, and then they're selling and repackaging that back to you. There's also an element, which is like the venture capital model in particular, right? So what does that mean? You have certain growth targets around scale, right? Because the model of a venture capital fund is 10x plus or bust.
Right.
You make money through either volume or pricing. And so if it's a volume-based perspective, what are you doing? You have to have speed and you have to have efficiency. And so that means rapid customer acquisition. And what do we know about relationships? Like relationships move at the speed of trust, right? And that is slow. So there's this fundamental disconnect in the model when you're just talking about the scale piece of it and you're talking about the need for volume.
Yeah.
But then there's the pricing piece, right? And this is where Peoplehood comes in.
The new startup from the SoulCycle founder, right?
Yeah. If you want to compete on pricing, well, then you're pushed towards premiumization.
Right. A month of Peoplehood is $165. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah. What I call like the privatization of community. We've privatized these types of interventions that used to be shared experiences that we all have. And so a lot of this gets really tricky once we enmesh that with the venture capital-based funding model.
That's a really, really, really excellent point. I've seen some memes floating around about how if someone proposed the idea of a free public library today, they would get laughed out of the building. You know, it's very troubling to think that access to community might become a paywalled thing or something only available to certain classes of people.
Nobody's investing a bunch of money in saying, hey, Brittany, you can go to the bar and meet some people. You can go like sit on the side on the stoop of your apartment building and talk to passersby. Like nobody's throwing billions of dollars into marketing campaigns telling you that that's the case. All the dollars are going toward telling you, hey, you need a tech solution to be able to help you to do this, right?
Yeah. Vauhini, you made a really good point in your pre-interview with our producer, Liam. You were so brilliant.
What did I say? Yeah.
You said capital is so powerful that while we know there are other ways than investing in tech startups to address issues in our society, there seems to be less money for other kinds of solutions.
Yes. So we all know that problems exist in society. I was watching the Super Bowl ads. I watched just the ads of the Super Bowl.
That's the best part.
Exactly. And there was this one ad, I don't know if you two saw it, there was this one ad that started out as like this really radical message about public health funding and how it's all broken. And I was like, who is going to be sponsoring this ad? I thought it was like some kind of public service announcement. I had no idea. And then it turns out it's this startup. It was a startup that was selling some, I don't know, like web-based pharmaceutical something or other. It's not false that these problems exist. The problem is making some venture capitalists a bunch of money rather than solving the problem. And so, yes, like we could invest a lot more money in public health, in education, in all these social systems, in infrastructure, in parks where we can all congregate and spend time together, in shelters. But that's really expensive and takes a lot of political will. So instead, we allow venture capitalists to invest in companies that then insinuate themselves into our communities, into our social systems.
And to believe that there is this quick self-help fix that is going to solve these issues just reflects not a sense of the depth of these challenges.
And the solution they're offering us is a solution that plays into this idea that individualism is more powerful than communal action, right? Like you can sign up for an app by yourself. You don't need to get together 2 or 10 or 20 or 50 people in your community to do it with you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. What we've decided is kind of to apply the logic of transaction and the logic of commerce, which is all based on individual decisions, to the realm of human relationships.
When we come back, do these apps help the people who need it most?
I really do think it's worth naming across all of this is the class divide.
Stick around.
This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Thinkorswim. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This message comes from NPR sponsor REI Co-op. You can't make more time, but when you opt outside, you can make the most of it. So make time for those early mornings, last-minute trips, and timeless views. For small victories, big fails, and everything in between. And when you're ready, REI has the gear, clothing, classes, and advice to help you make the most of your time out there. Visit your local REI Co-op or rei.com/opt-outside. This message comes from Homes.com. When you're shopping for a home, you want to know as much about the area around it as possible. Homes.com has got you covered with a comprehensive neighborhood guide from local experts. Homes.com. We've done your homework. This message comes from Thuma. Create your oasis with Thuma, a modern design company that specializes in furniture and home goods. By stripping away everything but the essential, Thuma makes elevated beds with premium materials and intentional details. With clean lines, subtle curves, and minimalist style, the Thuma bed collection is available in 4 signature finishes to match any design aesthetic. To get $100 towards your first bed purchase, go to thuma.co/NPR.
So I think to a certain degree, people can understand the value, or at least they see the utility in getting on dating apps and looking for people to date, right? But also there's so much fatigue from people matching apps like, OkCupid, where admittedly I did find my husband, or
congratulations, a success story.
Yeah. But people are tired of them. Would people even be excited to do the same kind of song and dance to meet friends?
Okay, I have a hot take.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay.
A couple of years ago, I spent a year in Madrid because my husband had a sabbatical. And when we started the year, I didn't speak Spanish at all. And then I took intensive Spanish classes and started to learn. And then about halfway through the year, I got on this website called conversationexchange.com, which is very like old school, not some new bells and whistles, well-funded startup or anything. And I wrote to people on this website who were Spanish speakers who wanted to practice their English and started meeting up with them in person. I now have 3 very good friends in Madrid who I met through that site. Notably, we don't use the site anymore. We just used it to meet up the first time. And we talk on Zoom all the time when we're in different countries. When I'm in Madrid, we spend a lot of time together. And they're 3 of my close friends.
Yeah.
And I met them on a website, I will say.
There's something really interesting Vauhini said. And I think it gets this idea that tools are neutral, right? And what we've decided is to apply values to these tools, like growth, scale, efficiency, values of the market, to tools that ultimately, if our end goal is facilitating human relationships and community, those values are misapplied. And so, Vauhini, what I hear in your experience is that was actually a tool that was well designed to facilitate connection, right? There are other examples of that as well, right? There's this group that I wrote about. It's in Vermont called the Front Porch Forum, and they're the opposite of Nextdoor. They are intentionally designed to facilitate slow, frictionful interactions that demonstrate social trust in neighborhoods. And they were able to do that because they bootstrapped that model with an intentional design of the tool to promote relationships, both online, but in real life. Whereas Nextdoor took $400 million in venture and private equity funding. And because of those things, had to hit certain targets around scale, around revenue, around growth, that then ended up pushing them away from those very values that we're talking about. So when I hear you, Vauhini, that's a tool for, as Ivan Illich would say, a tool for conviviality. It's a tool designed for interaction and for relationship, not for the outcomes of the market.
Yeah.
That seems right. And it's notable that I went on this site one time to arrange meetups with these real human beings and then moved to, texting with them to set up a time to meet, right?
And that's a problem. I mean, we talked about the app Timeleft, matching strangers up to go out to eat dinner together. And that's one of the problems that app is having, is people meet and then they leave the app to start their own WhatsApp groups. the founder is trying to keep reconnection in the app.
Which is a problem only by the logic of the market, right?
Right.
If the goal is really to get people to have friends, then they've been super successful, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking about another type of digital companionship, aside from Meeno, the mentoring relationship advice AI-powered app for humans, there are also a lot of AI companions out there that are being touted as a possible solution to loneliness, as opposed to, these other companies that are more focused on human-to-human relationships. And I tested one out. I tested out having an AI boyfriend for a week on the show, which my ultimate thought was like, when you have an actual husband, an AI boyfriend is lacking. Like, I would really need some really compelling conversation to get me to really start cheating for real. The AI cheating was not doing it for me. But there have been some studies that show that these companions do reduce loneliness. And we talked to a great journalist about this a couple of years ago. She'd spoken to people who were widowed or who had illnesses that made it difficult for them to be intimate with other people. And the AI companions were helpful. But I wonder, are users missing other benefits of human-to-human interaction?
I have so many thoughts on this. In the perspective of, can this be a tool that's useful? Okay, in a period of time where you've lost a loved one, where you've experienced some acute isolation, and having something to kind of interact with in a short period of time, that feels like a tool that could be useful for people in acute periods of challenge. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if you look at apps like Replica, which is literally...
That's the one that I used. Yeah, that's the one that I used.
Doesn't compete with your husband yet, but apparently the models are getting stronger. But if you look at an app like Replica, they are competing to be your friend or your significant other. The business model is staying on those apps. My concern with this, and we haven't talked about it in the conversation, but I really do think it's worth naming across all of this, is the class divide. And when you look at the groups who are most socially isolated and most disconnected, it's consistently people without college degrees. If you're someone who is looking for a relationship, if you're someone who is looking for connection, there is an entire economy that's now built in providing these synthetic alternatives to relationship. And that to me is a very dystopian future.
You raise a really good point. I'm curious why specifically the degree is sometimes a marker of difference as far as feeling isolated. I imagine it's because college for many people is one of the last opportunities where you are kind of specifically placed in an environment with making friends being one of the major points of being there.
Yeah, exactly. And essentially what's happened is we've created college as this supercharger of our relational lives. We have full administrative teams that are about building relationships on campus.
Right.
And then at the same time, we don't have an alternative pathway, right? But there's another piece, which is the structural piece in it. The returns on that degree socially have gotten even more extreme because the civic infrastructure of our communities has declined so much. So in the past, you're a member of a church or a temple or a mosque, and that provides a structure. In the past, you're a member of one of these civic groups. In the past, you're more likely to be in a relationship. And by the way, if you're working, you're more likely to be in a union. If you don't have a college degree, the stability of your job is much less solid. So you're more likely to be working in a retail industry or a service industry where you have precarious workplace. You don't know what your schedule is next week. How are you going to plan to spend time with people? How are you going to plan to be in community?
Yeah.
It's not that anyone without a degree is worse at building relationships, but it's so much more work is put on you yourself, both to overcome barriers and then to do all this DIY community building and planning that some of these groups used to provide.
I got one last question for you both. How do we get out of loneliness?
For me, something I argue for and I write about in my book is just acknowledging the way we're doing in this conversation here. A, what's happening, right? And then B, the fact that we do have agency. Nobody's forcing us to use TikTok or Facebook or Tinder or whatever. We can if we choose to, but nobody is forcing us. There are a lot of incentives lined up in order to try to get us to use these things. But we do have free will. We do have agency. We do have choice. And I think the only starting point to moving out of this into something better is exercising that agency, like really working hard to exercise that agency and to try to do it collectively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm of the perspective that like the shift that needs to start is a kind of shift in what we value in terms of how we relate to other people. The second thing is kind of the structural and policy change. There's examples throughout the countries of local government offices providing grants for neighborhood dinners and block parties and these things for people to gather. And then like the final piece is community. And I think so much of this is about kind of bottom up community building where people recognize that their particular place is worth stewarding. More people cultivating civic life in their places will make civic life more robust over a 20, 30, 40-year time period.
Like they say, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The second best time is right now. This was really great. Sam, Vauhini, thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
That was Sam Pressler, who studies community and social connection at the University of Virginia's Karsh Institute of Democracy, and Vauhini Vara, veteran tech reporter and author of the upcoming book, Searches, Selfhood in the Digital Age. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Liam McBain.
This episode was edited by
Jasmine Romero.
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Boll & Branch. Change your sleep with Boll & Branch's airy blankets, cloud-like duvets, and breathable sheets. Feel the difference with 15% off your first order at bollandbranch.com with code NPR. Exclusions apply. See site for details. This message comes from Bombas. Socks, underwear, and T-shirts are the top 3 requested clothing items by people experiencing homelessness. Bombas makes all 3 and donates 1 item for every item purchased. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off.
This message comes from Tourism Australia. Australia, a land of contrast, where white sand beaches are almost as plentiful as flat white coffees, and where you can go away for a vacation yet somehow feel right at home. Explore more at australia.com.